And I am the father of some children, one of whom falls in this generational group who, as Alan described, are caught in that catch-22. No experience, therefore no job. No job, therefore no experience. And frankly, if I can find a way, mistakes or not, wet morning in London or not, that gets my son onto the job ladder, getting some experience and then getting a job afterwards, I'll take it, thank you very much, and I'll take it very happily.
We'll go to our next, please.
Elizabeth Vose. In light of the criticism of the BBC's coverage of last weekend's Jubilee celebrations, has the BBC indeed lost the plot?
Given that there were a whole set of events, are you thinking specifically of the river pageant or more generally?
I'm thinking specifically of the river pageant and your tweet saying the BBC had lost the plot.
You have to be very careful. I did not say the BBC had lost the plot. How would that be? I simply said I am told by others, and asked whether the BBC had lost the plot. You put it into your case. Could you rest your case for a second, David Davis, while I bring in Salma Yaqub?
Of course, there have been complaints. Many people watched it. In fact, the coverage was watched by millions of people and appreciated. But there were complaints that maybe it was too dumbed down, that people wanted to know the history behind some of the boats, and this was not relayed. And people are perfectly entitled to do that. Do I think that somehow the BBC should now be attacked forever on that? No. I think it's an institution that I certainly feel proud of. It's certainly the go-to station that I would go to for authoritative information. It's respected around the world for its independence. But of course, as with any institution, where improvements can be made, they should be made.
Douglas Murray.
No, I don't think it's lost the plot, but I don't think it was by any means its finest hour. I probably shouldn't say this on this show. I'll never be invited back. I simply turned over to Sky, and but I did. I'm afraid I didn't. I mean, I think that generally, and it's not actually the BBC's fault alone. The BBC is in this terrible position. It is criticised whatever it does by somebody who says, they're letting us down, they're doing worse than they've ever. There's always somebody who thinks that about the BBC. I just simply think that generally in the country at the moment, the BBC appears to have got the idea that a lot of people have got, that we've become this sort of noddyish, childlike nation who need to be spoken to as if we're teenagers. And you even saw it, I have to say, in the concert the next night, which I didn't watch on any channel. Nothing on earth can persuade me to watch Gary Barlow interviewing Cheryl Cole and then watching Cliff Richard try to sing. I'm sorry, I have nothing against any of those particular performances, but it is a very strange thing we have in Britain. We're not a grown-up society, it sometimes seems. We all have to pretend like we're kids. And apart from anything else, we're all going to work till we drop from now on, so we might as well grow up.
David Davis.
I was watching actually from a rather privileged viewpoint in the House of Commons, but I had the BBC on behind me, and the first thought that struck me after watching about an hour of the BBC's rather desperate coverage was, where on earth are Dimblebys when you need them? My second thought was really rather cruel as well, which was, it's a little like that phrase, military intelligence. BBC management is an oxymoron, with the emphasis on the last two syllables. They had a fantastic opportunity here. They had 1,000 stories on that river, which they could have played and repeated. They had a fantastic 1,000 years of history they could have talked about. And what do we get? A bunch of ignorant, second-class celebrities. That's really what I saw. This was an occasion when our tradition, our history, should have been brought together by our greatest institution, the BBC, to make us proud of what we are. I'm afraid the royal family did us proud, the BBC did not.
Alan Johnson.
Well, I didn't see this coverage, and I was going to suggest that I chair this and you join in as a panellist, Jonathan, because you obviously have very strong views on this. I didn't see the coverage. Indeed, my disappointment was that they didn't cover the splendid flotilla on Humberside and watch it from Hesel Foreshore rather than this second-rate event
That's in his
London.
constituency, by the way.
But I think Douglas makes the point. You know, when the coronation took place in 1953, very few people had television sets, and if you did, you didn't have a choice. You had to watch the BBC. Now you've got a multiple of choices. I'm a great defender of the BBC, and if you didn't like the coverage, switch over to another channel.
Thank you. Any answers? Number is 03 700 100 444, and the email address is any.answers@bbc.co.uk. To our next, please.
Judith Graham. The little word fat is under fire this week. Does the panel think that adjectives should be banned because they might upset some people?
This relates to the 1986 Act, Section 5 of which, the Public Order Act, says that using words which anyone in earshot might find insulting is a criminal offence. That is in England and in Wales, and there are those who are campaigning against this. Alan Johnson.
Oh, well, this is news to me. I wouldn't have thought. I wouldn't have thought we should spend much parliamentary time on this. Did you say the word "fat" was?
There are those.
Yes,
there are parliamentarians who are suggesting that the word "fat" is so offensive that it should conceivably or could conceivably be included within Section 5 because it might be a word that offends someone who hears it.
Well, I can't see that seeing the light of day. I think that sounds rather ridiculous to me. I think that if there is an issue here about obesity, and I suppose one of the issues about young people and children in particular, given that we have to tackle this scourge, which is actually the biggest health threat we face. You know, when the NHS was established, the problem was diseases like diphtheria, and if anything, malnutrition. Now, the biggest threat to our health and the biggest problem for the NHS in coping with it is obesity. So I would think if it applies anywhere, then you should be very careful about allowing children to use these, to receive these phrases as if it's okay to bandy them around, and take the opposite view to actually encouraging youngsters onto a proper diet, because there's many adults that need to give them show them an example on that. But I wouldn't change the law to include the word fat and suggest. I don't think, David, it's an unparliamentary term. I think I could call you on the floor of the House of Commons. I could call you fat.
This is a specialist area for David Davis, so he can come to it. But there's no.
What, fatness is my specialist area?
Section. I thought I was
isn't.
referring to Section 5 of the Public Order Act of 1986, which has engaged your political attention.
Yes, well, let's first deal with the political correctness bit. I mean, I actually think that this continuous attempt to redefine English so you can't use one bit or another is one of the corrosive aspects of our society today. I want to be able to say what I mean and mean what I say. Now, in terms of the Public Order Act 1986, I think it was, 86 or 87.
That's what I told you.
What Jonathan's referring to is a campaign we are running because it is, would you not believe it, a criminal offence to say something which is insulting to people. Now, Alan and I would never be able to talk to each other at all. If you had to exclude insults from what we said. And I think that one of the great things about our country, one of the great things that makes us British, English, you pick what you want, is our ability to say precisely what we want, our freedom of speech. And it's one of the things that makes our country what it is, and when we do away with it, we will do away with the traditions that make us great. So I think it's a ridiculous idea, and we should just throw it out.
Salma Yaqub.
Well, I certainly would be wary of any steps to attack our freedom of speech, aside from the jokey aspect that people are referring to. I think it's quite dangerous when people are told what they can and can't say. But for me, I think it's a different issue. I think there is an issue of civility. So having said we're allowed to say what we want, I think there is a question, what kind of society do we want, though? And of course, I would much rather have a society where our kids, the kind of thing that we just teach our children, be nice. don't bully other children, don't say things which are going to hurt them deliberately. And at the moment, because there is so much emphasis, both on young women and young men now, in terms of their appearance, and being fat or being overweight is seen as socially unacceptable, and therefore to tease people on the basis of their body size is one form of bullying. I think this is what was underlying the concern. But I don't think bringing the law in is actually going to help it. This is a cultural issue. This is an issue about how we talk to our kids and how schools talk about these issues, and how, as a society, we don't make people feel upset about their body image. At the moment, we're seeing a rise, not just in girls, but in boys, with anorexia and all sorts of psychological issues to do with weight and body image. And I think we do collectively have a responsibility in addressing these issues, you know, these unreal expectations of how people should look, and the way that appearance and superficial issues are so, you know, put up there, you know, rather than actually what really matters. But bringing in the kind of strong arm of the law, you know, telling people what they can and can't say is certainly not the solution.
Douglas Murray.
I agree, but this comes back slightly to the point I was trying to make before. Why do people make up rules for children and enforce them? Because children don't know how to behave. Why do we treat adults differently? Because adults should know how to behave. So a child should be encouraged and indeed persuaded and sometimes forced not to be unpleasant, not to be rude, not to be unpleasant to the fat kid in the class, not to tease the child who they think's gay or they think's of a different race or a different religion, not to be rude to people for being different, but to be polite to people, to learn basic manners. When they become a grown-up, it's different. And the way in which we show disapproval when people are grown-up and are horrible is by societal disapproval. It's not by making laws, it's not by throwing people into prison or keeping them for detention if they've said the wrong thing about somebody. It's by expressing things as grown-ups. Very briefly, if I may, journalists get this all the time at the moment. A few years ago, I wrote a piece attacking a decision by a council in Kent to award... somebody was awarded thousands of pounds of compensation because they were of Irish heritage and had heard a joke about an Irishman within hearing distance. And I wrote a piece at the time saying that it is absurd that somebody gets more money for facing an incoming joke in Kent than our